Let's see. Can you hear me? Okay, so Benedict Wallet Vilakazi, a biographical note. Benedict Wallet Vilakazi was born on 6 January 1906 at Groudville Mission Station near Stanger in the beautiful province of Natal in South Africa. His parents were members of the Zulu tribe, a nation of warriors, and both were devout Christians. They had six children, two boys and four girls, and family ties were strong. The poet grew up in the neighborhood of the mission station. It was then quite common for Zulu children to go to school, and in 1912, the child, who was destined to achieve so much for himself and for his people, entered the primary school at Groudville. He remained there until he reached Standard 4 when he went to Mariannhill, the Roman Catholic monastery outside Durban, to continue his schooling. Like many young African men and women of his day, Vilakazi took a teacher training course after reaching Standard 6. As a student at Mariannhill, Vilakazi acted as secretary to Father Bernard Huss. It was probably this association more than any other factor that influenced Vilakazi ever more strongly to seek distant educational horizons. But in spite of the interest, encouragement, and advice of Father Huss, the young Vilakazi gave little proof of his gifts and ambitions, either at Mariannhill College or as a young teacher. And it was only when he attended the Catholic seminary at Ikopo in Natal and came under the influence of enthusiastic priests that he became noticeable. For it was there that he devoted much of his spare time to study. This was unusual among African teachers at this time, and very few felt the urge to improve their educational qualifications, especially by the arduous means of spare time work. Vilakazi, however, persisted and succeeded in matriculating, after which he commenced in 1932 a university course. In 1934, he attained a Bachelor of Arts degree. Vilakazi had a very sensitive nature. He had lived with African graduates who despised anyone who did not have a university degree. The young Vilakazi was deeply hurt by their scorn, and his determination to climb to the top rungs of the educational ladder was probably motivated to some extent by a desire to rebuke those who had tried to belittle him. He achieved his first university degree by private study, but there were those who ridiculed and disparaged what they contemptuously called candlelight degrees. Their attitude inspired him to further effort, and it was partly his determination to silence his detractors that drove him to seek the highest academic honors. He had chosen isiZulu as one of his major subjects and had obtained a distinction in the final examination. It gained him a bursary from the University of South Africa to study for a Master of Arts degree in African Studies. Here, Vilakazi met a difficulty. Here, Vilakazi met a difficulty. At that time, higher education for Africans was provided by the University College of Fort Hare at the Cape, but it did not offer a senior course in African studies. He did not know where to run. Vilakazi was already known to academic authorities, and the University of the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg was in process of publishing in Zulu his first book of poems. Coincidentally, it was looking for an African assistant in its Department of Bantu Studies. Vilakazi seemed a suitable candidate for the post, and his eligibility was supported by Mr. later Dr. D. McMalcolm, then Chief Inspector of Native Education in Natal, who had always encouraged him and recommended him for appointment. I consider I consider Vilakazi a very suitable man for your purpose, he wrote. He is certainly keen on the study of Zulu and has already done quite a lot of writing one way and another. He has distinct ability. And so in 1935, Vilakazi was appointed as a language assistant to the Department of Bantu Studies at the University of the Witwatersrand, Johannesburg. He became the first African in South Africa to teach at a university for white students, and new vistas opened out before him. His good fortune was increased by finding a sympathetic colleague in Professor C.M. Doak, who was head of the Department of Bantu Studies. In addition to lecturing, Vilakazi continued his own studies, and in 1936 he was capped for the Bachelor of Arts honors degree in Bantu Studies. In 1938, he was awarded the Master of Arts degree by the University of the Witwatersrand. At that time, his life was full and rewarding, despite the fact that it was pervaded by tragedy, for as well as suffering many family bereavements. His academic and creative work was sadly affected by the antagonism of certain groups among his own people. Vilakazi represented a new phase. Okay, Vilakazi represented a new phase of cultural achievement among the Zulu people. At the beginning of the 19th century, Zulu literature was non existent. Its evolution is closely associated with the missionaries who were interested in the translation of the scriptures, in the preparation of catechisms, and the compilation of grammar books and dictionaries. Lacking education, the Zulus themselves could hardly be expected to make any important contribution to their literature, and by the end of the 19th century, there was not a single piece of creative writing by a Zulu. Even when the 20th century was well advanced, there was little or no significant contribution by Zulus to their cultural aspirations. When Vilakazi entered the literary field, there were no books of published plays or poems written by a Zulu. Only one short novel had appeared in print. I think that would have been Makema Makwaza Fuze. Okay, I continue reading. But from 1930 onwards, the Zulus evinced considerable interest in writing, and two writers in particular, Vilakazi and R.R.R. Dlomo, dominated the literary scene between 1930 and 1940. The urge to create had engrossed Vilakazi as much as the urge to study. As well as poetry, he wrote prose, including three novels, Noma Nini, which is Even When, Udingiswayo kaJobe, which is Udingiswayo, son of Jobe, Nje Nempela, which is Indeed, all with an historical background. Some of his verse had been published in the Zulu newspaper Ilanga laseNatal and in the Native Teachers Journal. By the time he joined the University of the Witwatersrand, his poetry was already well known, and as its first book in the Bantu Treasury series. Okay. By the time he joined the University of the Witwatersrand, his poetry was already well known, and as its first book in the Bantu Treasury series, the university had published in Zulu a collection of his poems with the title Inkondlo kaZulu, or Zulu Songs. Poetry was Vilakazi's greatest preoccupation, and he chose as the subject of his thesis for a higher degree the conception and development of poetry in Zulu. His thought was always permeated by his love of the Zulu people, their way of life, and the long and glorious history that lay behind it. Vilakazi's appointment as a language assistant at the University of the Witwatersrand caused opposition among a section of the Africans in the Transvaal. The effect of this was to make him avoid associating with Africans of his own type, and he thus became a controversial figure amongst his own people. For although the educated Africans respected him for his academic achievements and for his contribution to Zulu literature, they regarded him as cold, aloof, haughty, a man who was not easily approachable. They found him abrupt in his manner and sometimes deliberately rude. On the other hand, the uneducated African regarded him as a pleasant and easily approachable man. He conceived himself to be the spokesman of his people, and in his second book of poems, Amale Zulu, Zulu Horizons, he identifies himself with the struggles, fears, aspirations, sacrifices, and unconquerable spirit of his people. He was gravely concerned lest the Zulu heritage be lost to the younger generations. In his poems, he refers over and over again to the need for preserving those things which are sacred and precious to the Zulu nation. Yet, even while Vilakazi was pouring his love of his people and his faith in their future into his poems, they there were those who accused there were those who accused what? Who accused. Okay, I think it cuts off here. This is page X1X. And then from X1X, which is 19, it from 19 it jumps to page 18. Okay, it goes from page 19 to 18. Oh, okay, I see what happened here. Okay, who accused? Okay, I'll continue from here. They repeated to these two pages. Yet, even while Vilakazi was pouring his love of his people and his faith in their future into his poems, there were those who accused him of being insufficiently conscious of their sufferings and disabilities. He did not take an active part in politics. It was first it was his firm belief that he could not serve two masters and that he could not participate in politics and still perform his academic work satisfactorily. During the 8 years ensuing on his obtaining a Master of Arts degree, he addressed himself conscientiously to his duties as lecturer, his literary work, and his studies for a doctorate. In collaboration with Professor C.M. Doak, he assisted in the compilation of the Zulu English Dictionary. He broadened his knowledge of Western culture, particularly in the field of classical music, where his favorites were Handel, Bach, Schubert, Mozart, and Strauss. He reflected in his verse the two opposing currents which such activities aroused among his compatriots. On the one hand, it was felt that the impact of Western culture on Bantu culture produced practices and habits among the Africans which were regarded by some as offensive, while it was felt by others that all things belonging to their own culture should be despised as inferior. In or March, on 16 March 1946, Vilakazi's academic studies were rewarded by the award of a Doctorate of Literature degree by the University of the Witwatersrand for his thesis, The Oral and Written Literature in Nguni, the first African of Southern Africa to achieve this academic distinction. He was capped by the then Chancellor of the University, Mr. Jan H. Hofmeyr. By then, his early absorption with the concept of death had become a preoccupation. One of his earliest poems had been an elegy on his sister Siziwe, and in later works he had paid passionate tributes to his father, his wife, and his only brother. It has even been suggested that this preoccupation with death was itself an indication that he would not live long. It infuses much of his work. On 26 October 1947, Benedict Vilakazi died at the age of 41. His mother survived five of her six children. Yo. Oh, okay, no, it means she only lost one. Okay. She had the sad and bitter experience of seeing them die. Wait, what? His mother survived five of her six children. Oh, yes. Okay, so five of her six children died before she did. Okay, she had the sad and bitter experience of seeing them die when they reached the age when much was expected of them. When Vilakazi died, he was undoubtedly the most outstanding figure in Zulu literature. His writings have had considerable influence on Zulu authors, particularly writers of poetry. Although continuing to be a controversial figure among Africans, none could deny his deep love of his people and their way of life, nor his significant contribution to their contemporary culture. Okay. This was written by C.L.S. Nyembezi. Okay, here's one of his poems called Upambatha Kamkwata. Upambatha Kamakwata. Okay, Upambatha Kamakwata. Husbands and wives, young men and young women, thunder has rumbled and died away, my people. Lightning through time has struck at the acacia. Lightning through time has struck the sons of women. Now it has struck Makwata's gifted grandson, whose strength was unimpaired, who was not old, whose fame was young, but he is not forgotten. Old men and women, youths and girls and babies, our pioneer has left us. Our morning star has fallen. Our finder of paths has disappeared. He who inspired us all to yearn for learning. Alas, with no farewells, he has departed. He whose name was cherished by his people. Listen, my own black brothers and my sisters. You should express your horror at his death, or at this death, the chosen of your race, so tragically few, are dying and leaving us bereft. They die before a doctor can attend them. They die while doctors, black and white, are baffled. What kind of fatal illness thus afflicts them and leaves their sorrowing people to lament? Where is Bambata now? Where is Makawa's grandson? And where the poets of praises, Magolwane? Alas, they have vanished from this world of pain. Shall they inspire, like muses, younger poets? Thus did you speak, O poet of Dingane. Man shall live and man shall die, but man's achievements shall endure. Their names shall echo through the empty sites. Sure. We've come to the end of our lecture